These are the men and women of Beaver Valley, the bravest of the brave. They fought fearlessly for their country, their city, their community, and for the ideals we share as Americans. They served proudly in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Here now are their stories, their own experiences in their own words, the words of the heroes of Beaver Valley. 90-year-old Pat-Cody, a Brighton Township native, grew up and lived in the Industry Midland area his whole life. He enlisted in the Marine Corps in March 1943 and trained at the Naval Air Technical Training Center, eventually becoming part of a B-25 bombing squadron as an armorer.
If there was something wrong with the armament, the guns or something like that, then I would fly with them and try and make a determination what the cause was. Sometimes it was the person charging the guns hadn't had Wheaties for breakfast. He just wasn't pulling hard enough on the cables.
Cody's squadron operated out of Sterling Island, Green Island, and later in the war, Emera. Missions were carried out on enemy positions in New Britain, New Ireland, and Bougainville.
I wound up flying 17 missions. The first one I was on, I was up front with the pilot and co-pilot, and I'm looking out and I could see tracers arcing over our sister ship, and I said, I wonder if they know they're being shot at. And the response to me was, don't worry about them. We are also being shot at. But it made for something for you to kind of tighten up your gut and hope they missed. There was only one occasion, or one area in northern Bougainville where they had a lot of anti-aircraft batteries. And you would hear them sometimes and see them. The first time I saw it, I assumed that one of the engines was backfiring. And the next pass we made, the navigator said, "Peel off," and they leaned us plane over and fell away. And where we had been, there was about 8 or 9 bursts of anti-aircraft fire. So I probably wouldn't be telling this story if that guy hadn't hollered to peel off. But it wasn't unusual for planes to come back from that area where they had hits in the fuselage and so on.
West Mayfield born and bred, Michael P. Thellman Sr. was the last of a band of 4 brothers who served in the South Pacific during the war. He passed away shortly after sharing his story.
My dad come from Germany, and Mom did too. And they figured if we would go over in the Europe side of the country, you might be battling against your own people. That's how them people thought, So we all volunteered to go to South Pacific. That's how we ended up over there, all of us.
Thellman's unit was sent straight overseas to New Zealand. He fought in 3 invasions: Saipan, Tinian, and Tarawa.
Oh, Tarawa was a bad bottle. It was a bad island. You had to hold your own there. You couldn't move too fast. What helped us a lot with the Marines, they had these Japs were all dug in the ground. They had trap chutes, trap doors and stuff where they could come out. If you walk by, and they can open up that trap door and shoot you from behind and shoot you in the back. But anyway, what helped us a lot, these groups come in with flamethrowers, and they threw flames into the caves, where they lived. Yeah, that helped us a lot. Yeah. And there's a lot of hand-by-hand rifle firing on them islands. You almost had to stay in one place. There are different groups of Marines just scattered around. And then going in with them Higgins boats, they put the troops in there and go in there, and you couldn't get by. They had barbed wire on the shores there in the water. you'd have to get out and go through the water and walk up to the beach. That's where we lost a lot of Marines. Yeah. Well, in the long run, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being in the Marine Corps, and it makes a good guy out of you when you come out too.
Thellman would come home from the war while some of his brothers were still fighting. The eldest brother, Daniel, was wounded on Iwo-Jima, and another brother, Steve, was killed.
He had a chance to stay as an instructor here in the States, you know, rifle shooter, and he said the rest of us were overseas. He wants to go too, so that's the reason he volunteered to go overseas.
An Aliquippa native, Alex Yawor graduated high school in 1942. He initially wanted to join the Army Air Corps, but was turned away because their quota was filled. A high school friend suggested he enlist in the Marine Corps with him. Yawor ended up in the 4th Marine Division as a rifleman. The first invasion he participated in was the Marshall Islands. An officer discovered Yawor's artistic abilities, and he was moved to Battalion Intelligence, where he would go on scouting and patrolling missions.
Just before it got dark, they would send a group of us about 50 yards or more away from the front line. And we'd have to find some place to hide, and then we'd wait and see if the enemy were going to come. And there were a few times that they did come, and we had a radio man with us, and so we sent a message back to the front lines to tell them that the enemy is heading right to them, and they were prepared for him. And that was one of my jobs. But I don't like to talk about I lost a lot of friends.
Yawor would go on to Saipan with his division and fight in a bigger battle there.
On Saipan, our captain, well, he was a lieutenant at that time. He'd pick certain one of us and send us up to the front lines to get information. But this one young Marine, for some reason the captain, the lieutenant, didn't send him up to the front lines with us. But then one time he did. And we always worked in pairs. We would dig a foxhole, and always the same two. Well, this one he didn't have a buddy to dig a foxhole. So I said, well, I'll go with you, since this is the first time up with him up the front lines. But my buddy said, Alex, you and I have been together so far. Don't break us up. So I said, okay. So this other guy from our section, he found somebody else. So they dug their foxhole. And the next morning, the Japanese had a mortar attack against us. And I must have had a guardian angel, because a mortar shell landed right in the hole where I would have been digging with that fella. Killed both of them.
Yawor would go on to fight at Tinian, and finally, Iwo-Jima.
Our division was the worst section of the island. And we had more casualties than any other division that was there. And the terrain was terrible. They were like crevices. That some places there's only enough room for one person to walk through, and you don't know what was on the other side. And that was the bad part, because a lot of times there was Japanese on the other side, and that's how we lost a lot of people. Going around these places, the Japanese, they had caves all over that island, all over it. And they bombed that island for 72 days straight. And all of us, we thought that when we hit the beaches, we're going to just walk right in. There won't be anybody alive there. So when we invaded the island, they were waiting for us. And every time we went from one island to the other and came back to Maui, they always, the ones that came to fill in the ones that we lost, they would always say, oh, if next one we go to, it's not going to bother you because you went through it already. Now, each one, you went to the first one, you were worried. If you weren't afraid, you had a problem. And so whenever you went to regroup and you're ready to go to the next one, it's not that, oh, it's not going to bother me, I was through it. It's, I'm going to the next one. Am I going to live through this one and come back? And then the third one, each time, it gets worse and worse and worse. So after I got discharged, I came home and I wasn't myself, and I didn't want to leave the house. My mother and my sister said, go out and visit with your friends. But I didn't want to go. So finally I started to go. And I wanted to do something to get my mind off of things. So I decided to do that, you know, a hobby of painting. And then after many years, this 2 wars started. And I have to give credit to this one woman because I read about her. She, I can't remember her name. She did portraits and gave them to the parents free of the fallen heroes from the 2 wars. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm halfway decent at doing portraits, I'm going to do this. And that's how I got started on doing these portraits. And but now I'm getting more and more and more, and this is my 82nd one, and I got 4 waiting. Somebody said war is hell. It's hell. It's hell.